Wrenching employees. I've bashed the management enough. It's your turn. Trust me on this one. You say, no, wait a minute. Nope, I was never a corporate manager. So can't help you on that one. I'm on your side normally. But let me tell you some of the problems I've seen over the years that gives management the heartburn. No, one of the reasons this burns me more than anything else, after what, 40 some years, almost 50 years in the working world, then if you count my years on farm work, darn near 50 years. Several times I've run into one thing that was the most annoying of all and got me in trouble because I'm not one to just back down, okay? So I'm speaking from a different point of view that a lot of other employees wouldn't have had trouble with, but something I was able to actually get my nose into a little. That when you're a poor employee, the better employees get jabbed. In a minute. First off, I'm going to give you a non-commercial commercial. You know, I'm always screaming RDB, read the book, or RDFB, read the fool's book. It used to be called RTFB. Here it is. This is the IT manual you can pick up, gensales.com. This is by Climber Publications. Now, I don't know if Climbers, which is also Haynes, Climbers, Climber Pro Series, Climber Manuals, Internet Implement and Tractor, but it's all from Haynes Publishing. And if they're even around anymore, that'd be a surprise because I've had this for a little while. Got it. No, it says 1990, so I don't even think they're around anymore. Printed in Malaysia, you can tell too. Trust me. But TO20, you can figure everything out just by tearing it apart. Yeah, but you don't have specs. But you can guess. We used to be able to guess. Trust me, it ain't worth it. Yeah, the book's overpriced, like $35 for that little thing. The other thing, charts. These were charts that were going to be thrown out by a case dealer for their electronics. Yeah, for their code reading, and you can pull out of a lot of their monitors. U codes, U19, U20. It gives you an idea that if you see a U code, diagnostic list, H5 menu, there is an H5 menu in there. Code D20, D21. If you go into the individual menus on some of these older tractors, like 10, 15 years old, this is the stuff you're going to run into. If you see one of these charts laying around and people are going to throw it away, for crying out loud, get your hands on it. The TL series, there you go. The HH codes, or H codes as we used to call them. H1, clutch calibration. H2, clutch calibration values. Now in this case, you're talking things that are important for, you heard the word, calibration. Why would they need to know? I don't know, but they do. The other one, this is an older implement and tractor. Let me tell you, I've had this puppy for many years. Intertech Publishing, Overland Park, Kansas. Now, this is an original. You say you're an employee, you're going to talk about employees and the stuff you run into there. This is one of the things I've run into. 1990 again. Okay, so I've had these a long time. The other one I bought recently, but this is one of those multiples where they're putting a lot of them together and charging big bucks. Well, this used to be $40 versus this one. I'm pretty sure I bought at Crapper Supply for almost the same money. You notice I bought them. You're an employee, you're going out into the field, or you're in the shop. If you're not looking at the manual before you ever really seriously get into it, then you're an idiot. And most employees don't. I don't know why they go into it without it. The first thing in troubleshooting is, yes, I know, Dave has his 4-step, or 3, what's he have? 3-step system? Complaint, cause, and correction. Yes. Well, complaint, cause, and correction. And he also adds on at the end of it, what is it? Confirm. So that's Dave's 4-step series. And that's basically the basis of all of troubleshooting. But on the other side of it, the John Deere system years ago that was brought in by most general industry and accepted as well, the first thing is know the system. Unless you really know the system. Well, years ago, if you'd asked me 185 Alice Chalmers, what do you want to know? Yeah, seriously. What do you want to know? I could have told you almost anything on that tractor, front to back. There was almost nothing on that tractor that I had not worked on. PTO valves, power director valves, hydraulic pumps, hydraulic systems. I knew I had 3 pumps. I knew I had an idea of the flow of the traction booster when it did an override from the main system on the hydraulics. Oh, there's a lot of stuff I knew about that tractor back in the 80s, let alone 90s. So there was quite a few things I learned, and some of the stuff I learned because I looked in the book, had an idea how the operation of the tractor went, and then some old guy would give me evidence of what he used to do for repair when he didn't read the book. So, what's up, my man? Hey, guys. So what I wanted to do today was talk what I expect employees to do as a former employee. Now I'm just retired doing my own work that I can tell somebody, yeah, go pound sand, or I can say, no, sorry, I don't do that, etc., etc. Somehow I lost something here. Here it is, it's back. When you're an employee, can I tell let's just say you're going for the job interview, especially you're a mechanic. I'm going to talk from the mechanic and technician point of view, but there's several different levels here that we have to work with. Now, one of them is the service writer. You're going to go in there clean cut, and you're going to about half dressed, similarly as if you were going into church on Sunday morning. Well, conservative mainline churches, okay? You're not walking into a hippie church, all right? I'm talking about general church. Nice clothes, okay? Not the best shoes. You have to have kickers. Hard toe. I'm going to say hard toe. Now, the idea here is when you're going for the interview, you're dressed well for it because now you're a service writer, but you're also dressed in nicer clothes because you're going to talk with the customer. You're actually a representative of a company. When you go out to look at the customer's machine or whatever, then you're also dressed with the shoes and the appropriate clothing that you're able to climb the machine still. Okay, I've got some Duluth polo shirts up here. They work out great for stuff like that. You're not going to be working hard in the shop very often. Now, another one is, all right, now you guys are popping up on here with all this stuff. Saying random stuff, Snake. What's up, my man? Anyway, time here is, let me see. I don't even know, 9 something. Oh, it'll be 9:20 Eastern Standard Time now. Clock went back. So that's basic for the service writer. What does the service writer need to know? Well, believe it or not, the exact same thing. The companies don't go with this. This is from my perspective, okay? If the service writer doesn't go to the same service schools as the guy in the shop, the company has failed, and the service writer needs to do a little pushing. Does he have to or she have to? No. Part of the problem you have, though, is, no, this is for the women in particular. There are only 2 genders. 2, okay, male and female. And there's some that kind of cross over, but still, they're male and female. Is that you don't need to be assertive in this, but you do need to be clear in your communications. Okay, and the main thing as a service writer is a skill that we don't have in the shop very often. Some of us do. The road warriors do have it, or they learn it, because it can be a learned skill, is translation communications. 99% of the time, everybody's speaking English, but you're trying to talk to someone and understand from their point of view what they're saying. And sometimes what that means is you're trying to train them. If you can't figure out what they're saying, you're trying to train them to your understanding. Okay? That's your skill as a service writer. It's a difficult one. And it's not one that's easily mastered. It's also one that's not continuous. Every once in a while, you're going to come in and have a bad day, or everything's fine, everything's going well, but you hit that one customer that 12 horsepower. He said 12 horsepower, but that doesn't mean anything to you. The example I'm giving is a foreign guy who was about 6'8" and weighed about 400 pounds. He could have taken a counter and ripped it right out of the 10-foot long counter with all its books and everything, picked it up and thrown it. The old boy was tough. And he's just screaming he needs a spark plug for his 12 horsepower. Took me 3 times each to finally get out of him what he was understanding. I said, is that for your lawnmower or your tractor? And he just screamed and slapped the counter and went out. Write it. In some cases, have them write it down. And I did say to him, I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand what you're saying. And then when I did understand, it's okay, 12 horsepower, what engine? And he just got mad, slammed the counter, and walked out. One guy told me, hand him a J8 spark plug. They don't care. hand him a J8 spark plug for the average 12 horse at the time. It would have been a wrong plug, and the engine would have run like crap. And they said, don't care, just give him a plug, take his money. If you're a service writer, the answer is no. Now, what I didn't know at the time, because I was only, 21 years old, and just trying to learn how to deal with customers, because I came from quite a shut-in household, is that the idea is to get them into the communications, pull out the spark plugs, and have the customer look them over. I didn't think of it then because the guy's already mad. Just walked in with a mad on, as they used to say. So you have to learn how to handle those people as well. I actually handled it in general quite well, but in specific, I was learning skills at 21. Skills that other people quite often have just in basic communication and dealing with those that can't communicate well. I didn't. But I did learn those later on. There's some people I could talk to and they'd say something to me with an angry, snarly face, and I'd start laughing. He'd say, "What are you laughing for?" I said, "Because I know you're busting my chops." "How do you know that?" "Crying out loud, you're from Oklahoma. We're in the gas field. I'm from New York. I mean, come on, you're busting my chops. I know it." And the guy laughed, "I like you. You're all right. I'm going to bust your chops a whole lot more. Now get my machine fixed." And off he goes. I found out later on, they said, "He's had a bad day. We've never seen him smile in the last 2 or 3 days. You've done good." So it does come in time. Of course, being 40-something years old at the time, that was a big plus. And age is part of it as well. You're a service writer and they bring you in because you're young. You're already starting from a disadvantage here in the Northeast in particular. Other places in the country, maybe not. But in the Northeast, people are looking for somebody that has a little bit of know-how. You start tagging into your 30s, they give you a little bit of a break. When you're in your 40s and you're walking out there, you have the problem more than they do. They expect you to know. So, learn. Get away from service writer. You're walking in, you're going to be a newbie in the shop, and you're going in for your job interview. May I suggest, and it might sound funny to some of you, you're going in Dickies work pants or jeans. Decent blue jeans, no holes. Don't iron them to creases like they used to do in the 70s, please. That looks so stupid you can't imagine it. It looked stupid back then, let alone now. And let me tell you, a quarter of the mothers back then in high school, they ironed their kids' jeans to a crease. I was like, whoa. Well, they're OCD and bored at home. Why? Because they didn't do the canning and other preparations. That's a shot. That's sexist. No, it's just a fact of life, man. So don't do it yourself. Don't let your girlfriend, wife, or mother do it for you. But you're starting as a newbie, so you're going to be in your 20s, early 20s, mid-20s, someplace in there. Walking into heavy equipment. Oh, you just came out of Ohio Diesel, baby. Or Nebraska, or one of those others that I have no idea what the name is. You're walking in, I got the credentials. Nah, you ain't got jack. This is the first start. When you walk in, you're walking in to be a smiling guy and happy. Hi, how are you? And meet you. But don't offer a lot of information and don't be overly happy. Just be a nice guy. You say, well, no, wait a minute. No, even the one that wants you to be that perk up. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, do you want me to jump? How high on the way up? No, don't be that employee. 2 reasons. One of them is he'll expect it, or she, depending on who the actual service manager is, because some people think that people don't need to have qualifications to be a service manager from the shop. They do. But you're walking in where they may or may not know. And so you're walking in, you're not going to be serious either. You might have a few little sarcastic quips here and there that are not on them or the company or anything else directly, but little fun things, And somebody says, well, I drove my car and that guy really screwed it up. And I said, yeah, well, he's an auto mechanic. What can you say? If you're confident in your work, you're confident in what you've done, you can make little barbs once in a while about some things like that, about another type of business mechanic or something else, but quietly. As you go through, listen. Do a lot of listening. Once you'll tell me about yourself. Well, you're going to tell them about yourself. Have a limit to what you're going to give them, though. You say, well, wait a minute. They just handed. They don't read. They don't. So what you write down, try to remember as much as you can. You're not going to remember it all. And then when they're asking you questions about certain things you wrote down, but you don't know exactly how you wrote it down, well, you're trying to get as close as you can because the guy is probably, or the manager is reading it while you're sitting there. And they're hoping you're saying the same thing. You're not gonna and accept that too. So, well, I'll try to get as and actually admit it. I'm trying to get as close to what I've written down there as I can, but just tell them. Your memory recall is very good about many things, but there's some things that just you write down your life and then you speak of it. So keep it simple when you're writing it down. I used to put down as much as I could for some of them, and I found out later on that wasn't always good because they'd take certain things wrong. I'm not saying leave out any critical things because let's just say you've been in juvie. Well, don't leave it out. You say, well, wait a minute. No, don't leave it out. I'm serious. Don't go into detail. Ask, have you been convicted of anything? Don't lie. Because on the basis they can find out if they put it to a lawyer and go do a search, but they're not going to find the detail. And if they start asking you for detail, just be honest and don't go into as much detail as you need. Make them drag it out of you. They say, well, now, wait a minute. You're not being real forthcoming about this. Well, no, I'm not proud of it. Yeah, I did the deed. I paid the time, and I'd like to move on. You've done two things. One of them is you've told them how things are. You've told them that you're contrite. You're in contrition. You're sorry for what you did. And they have something they don't have to look up anymore. You've been honest about it. So they're going to expect you to be more honest. And sometimes they'll take that thing you wrote out and just start talking to you. Well, if you're one of those that's confident in who you are, as they say, in your own skin, you just hit gold. Don't, how can I say it? I'm not sure how to put this. Don't edit your life. Don't create a life. Okay? Don't blow yourself up. It doesn't work. In the shop world, hands-on working world, it doesn't work. When you walk, yeah, I've done that before. Oh, man, I worked. Let me tell you how to just say it. Yeah, I've worked on a PC 750-6 Komatsu before. Oh, no, I just worked on it. I put a thermostat in it and did a little troubleshooting on some of the electronics. And I did some studying of the machine itself. But I said, as far as anything else, no. The largest actual machine I did any work on, in my case, serious and critical work, was PC 450-10. Well, then why did you? Because I have worked on one that large, so I'm familiar with that size machine. But I'm quite confident working on a PC 450-10. Why -10? So, because it has DPF exhaust systems and electronics and common rail system on the engine. So I have worked with those, and it has a closed center load sensing pump with the electronics over it. Electronic command system, and I've worked with their diagnostics. Oh, so you've got a computer? Well, I didn't need a computer. It's in the monitor. If they're familiar with the systems, you've just told them gold. And you're honest. Well, at least in my case, I was honest. So, because there'll be times they'll throw you to the wolves unless you put those limits on there. One interview I went to many years ago, I was writing down the job form right there on the counter because I was jobless at the time due to droughts and such. And I was looking for a job, and I was looking to get out of a job. It was bad. Oh, man. But anyway, I filled out the form, and they started asking me questions. Well, we know Gib Harrington, we know him real well. We've dealt with him before. I said, oh, okay. You might know him better than I do. And they said, why? Well, I just moved into the area a couple of months ago, and Gib had a 3-man layoff, 2 salesmen, and then later on me. And I said, salesmen weren't very happy. Oh, so you really know Gib well? And they said, no, not that well. And I know the machines well, and I was honest with them about what I knew, how long I'd worked there, and what I had worked on. Oh, well, then no, I wasn't there that long to know that. But I do know the guys, and we had those discussions. When I got done, the one boss pulled me aside, and he says, you know why we hired you? I said, I don't know. But you can tell me. And he says, we hired you because you're honest. What you told us, we knew was accurate. We wanted to be sure you were accurate. That was a huge plus. Another one that I ran into recently is, and this is as important as any part of it, when you show up to your job interview, if your job interview, say, is at 9 in the morning, don't show up at 8:30. Seriously. If you do show up by 8:30, one of the biggest things you're going to want to do is drive the yard. Try not to. If you're going to a larger place that has multiple branches or whatever, or good, just plain a sizable company, go out there and find places where people do drive around and look at as much of the yard on the roads and around as that you can. Get to know what's there. You'll see how people are washing their machines off, where they're working on them, what they're doing with them, and how big the rental fleet might be, the repair fleet, how things are laid out, and give you an idea how big, small, or medium an outfit you're looking at. You might even see a manager standing out there with one of the guys working, or they're just talking. You get to learn some of the peripheral, how the place operates. If you can, walk in and order parts. Yeah, if there's a part you can order from them, they have a tool or something you like, walk in and buy it. You say that, do this a week or two in advance, or a month in advance, it'd even be better. I say, well, that's okay. I've talked to you about getting into the interview and talking with the guy, but this is something that's just as important, is you canvassing the place. Seriously. You're looking for a place, especially in your 20s and 30s. It gets more important in your 30s and 40s than any other time in your life, believe it or not. When you get to your 50s and 60s, you start getting short-tempered about certain things in the mechanical industry. And then they get reluctant to hire you because you are short-tempered about stupid. I'm serious. I worked with some guys that were, how can you say it? Basically, they were as ignorant as a post, but what they knew, and they were hard workers. And the bosses didn't like them because they come out and tell them something stupid. They talk back. And there's a lot of people that do not like talk back at all. You need to learn that as well. You'll find that out from some of their employees. Another one that you can do that's very important, as much as anything else. My mama's a 304. That's interesting. If you knew my mama, you'd laugh. The other thing that's interesting is if you do have a machine or have worked on one, call in and ask them. See if you can find out some information. See if they blow you off. If they blow you off, as a customer calling in for information, then you're going to find out they'll blow you off as a mechanic or an employee there. They don't care. If they blow off the customer, what do you think they're going to do to their employees? It's a critical thing to know. I was at Anderson Equipment, and one of the things to the branch down here in Endicott was there were 3 or 4 of us that didn't get along, but we worked along well. The customers would call in for information, and they'd call us out of the shop and talk and try and give them all the information they did. I'm going to say on a bad month, 50-50 shot whether you got the job or not. On average, it was 3/4 of the time that call came in and you gave them the information, they felt confident you knew what you were doing so much more than they would feel confident you got the job. I'm serious. And when people get in there and the company draws back and said, we aren't helping you unless you bring your machine there or have us come out there, then you know you're up against it, because many of the companies, especially here in the Northeast, have their own mechanics. They have their own people. When you teach them how to use the stuff, the mechanic in the shop will admit his limits and you will get the job. And we were talking over 50% here. When they call in, yeah, at worst, it's a 50-50 shot whether you get the job or not. That's a consistent through all the dealers in this area here. So why find out how they play it? Because you may end up laid off because someone has a bad attitude above you, or in the shop as well. Those are important things to know. So you got the interview, you guys are doing the discussion, they take you out to the shop and start doing the walk around. Do you have your safety glasses with you, or do they provide them? That's another one to think about. You go out in the yard, some places are going to want hard hats, but that's up to them to provide some of that. If you have it in the car, and they say, well, do you have your hard hat with you? I said, sure, it's in the car. Why didn't you bring it with you? Well, I was unsure what we were going to do with this interview, but I do have it with me. You got hard toes? Yep. Well, off you go. You won't need it. Gas field stuff they're going to need, and some of them, they even show up to some of the job sites. You need fire retardant clothing. Don't wear it if you don't have to. Whew, that stuff's rugged. Anyway, that's a good sign when they take you out and you're walking through the shop. Don't try and say something stupid. If they introduce you to somebody, there's a purpose for it. They want that person's opinion later. If you can, shake hands. If their hands are dirty, just say, don't worry about it. And if they pick up this big greasy thing, just look at them and laugh. Okay, I worry about it now. I'd like to stay clean for the interview. Be honest and have fun. But like I said, don't be the perky guy. And, hey, how you doing? Oh, it's great to meet you. That's a waste of time. They want to know how your average personality is. If you are one of those perky guys in the shop, you're probably not getting the job. You're scary. And for certain managers, you will get the job. And later on, you'll be fired because they'll get tired of that personality. You say, yeah, but everybody, they do seem to talk about it up front, that they want you to be the one that says how high on the way up. But it's not all that true. You want the guy that when they come out and ask a question, gets a straight answer because they're asking you a question that they're going back to the phone or someone else in the building, or they personally need to know the information to do the write-up for either another mechanic or you. The final write-up is you write everything down in mechanic ease. Well, write it down. And if you talk to them, so how do you do your write-ups? Well, it depends on how you want it. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, there's several different ways of doing a write-up. They said, there's a technical way where everything is on there, right down to the troubleshooting. I said, then there's the poor man's way where you write it up so there's not a whole lot to read and the general information's on there, where it's almost as if machine broke, found machine problem was X, did Y to fix the thing, confirmed that the job was done and complete. And there's some of the guys that they love that. We had that. I know I've used this name before, that jackass Jerry Skiff. I want all the information. Wrote it all down. Blew a gasket just worse than he did saying he wanted the information. And I told him before, we write it brief because nobody reads them. I said, when we wrote it long to hand, everybody was screaming. And I didn't say including you. I just let it ride. Well, I need all the information. Oh, I gave it to him. Said the following tests were done, and then I would point out in mechanic ease, from this contact to this contact, such and such a reading from here to there, voltage, ohms, milliamps, whatever was required for it, and followed troubleshooting right on down the line. It was used this chart in the book and went on down through, put it all there. And it took me an hour to write that puppy up. What are you doing down there? You want the specifics? Here they are. He got them, didn't know what to do with them. And then you're going to be stuck with some of those clowns. Then they're finally going to say, just give me the Cliff Notes, if you know what Cliff Notes are. The short version of study for your exams, like your SATs and such. More college exams. So that's another one to think about carefully. Hats. If you're one that normally wears hat, put the hat on. Make sure it's clean. And a neutral name. If you're going into a Komatsu dealer and you're wearing a steel hat, you're probably going to get away with it. You're better off wearing one that's camouflaged with no name on it. But you know what I mean. If you're putting in Cub Cadet or something like that, and you're going into a Komatsu dealer, yeah, they're going to fly with it. Depends on how pretty and showy it is. What in the world? My bride gave me a picture. This is interesting. I have no idea what it is or where. They're hiding something. Anyway, so that's start of one there. Now, you're going to get another job interview. You just got through that one. You've walked around the place. You've gone. Number two, but another one. Number one, I should say. You're in the middle of the interview. You got to take a leak. Excuse yourself and go take a leak. Don't just sit there twisting in the wind. Why? Because they find out how you were able to break conversations and start in again. Is it annoying? Sure, they don't want it. They don't want anything to do with it. But if you have that communication skill and that personal, you're actually going to end up with brownie points for it. Just say, excuse me, sir, you mind if I go take a leak? Or just say, I got to go to the bathroom. Can I get a minute here, please? I said, sure. Overly courteous with overly mannerly? No. Straightforward and If you'll excuse me a minute, I need to come back. But find a good place to break. He says, well, we see here, let me say, and let him finish his conversation. And it said, give him the answer you can. And it said, if you don't mind, because you have the floor, you're answering him from his question. I'm just going to say him because it's easier. I said, and while we're on that, if you can give me a minute, I need to go to the bathroom quickly. And he's okay, sure. We're down the hall and ask questions, directions, everything else. Go find it and then come right on back. In between, somebody may enter the room. Enter the room like you're expected back there. Wait until he's done with his conversation because quite often somebody else may have the chair. And wait till they're done and then sit. You see, you're getting awful specific. Yeah, these things are important. Somebody said something else years ago about this conversation because some managers were chosen, in a particular managers and even general employees in the shop. There was one guy that lost, supposedly, and this is back in the 70s, lost a job because he salted his food before he tasted it. Take it to the bank. I don't know what to tell you. Two things on that front, though. If you lost the job because you salted your food before you tasted it, I generally taste my food before I salt it, unless down here at the diner, if they took me down here to the Dolphin, I know how their food's prepped and I know what I need to do or what I would do. So, yeah, if you're working with one of those, be happy that you didn't get the job. But at the same time, while you're sitting at home wondering, or they've called you and said, no, I'm sorry, we don't want you for the job, or a couple of weeks has passed by, I'd give it a week, 1 to 2 weeks, and then give a call in and see how it's going and what's going to happen in there. So just curious as to the possibility of accepting the position at your place, because you'll find that some of them drag on out, wondering who's going to call back and who needs the job. But then again, you can't be desperate. Okay, when you call in and say, well, I need the job, but, more than that, I'm wondering how the process is going for you. Maybe you have a better employee, a better choice or not. Then I can continue on my search. That gives them two things. One of them is they know you're interested in the job. They know you probably need the job. But on the other hand, you're also letting them know that if this isn't a possibility, I need to continue looking. You're not sold on just them. In other words, you're giving them the idea that, yes, I want to be your employee, but at the same time, if I'm not going to be, I shouldn't be waiting forever. But you're not saying that. You're letting them pick up on that communication. You may lose a job over a phone call like that. That's happened before with other people. I don't think I've run into that in a few, and I've had a few jobs on and off for 60 some years. And partly because of markets, partly because of weather, and the other part of it is I'm hard. There are certain things I do not accept. And the hard part is, in my case, to give you an example of my personality, is listening to a new area manager of Eastern Area New York and Anderson Equipment in there complaining all day about how I've done this and how I wrote up that and how this got done and how this, and the guy sat there and the guy they made branch manager without making branch manager turned and looked at him and said, while you're shooting your mouth off, the customers are pretty happy with him. Well, I don't know. I said, we get phone calls in specifically asking for this employee. That was me. And he says, well, I don't like him. And I said, well, it doesn't matter what you like. There's a lot about it. Him, I don't. And this is the young boss I had at the time talking to me face to face, telling me this. And he says, I'm telling you because A, you can take it, and B, you're going to love the ending. And I did love the ending. Not that much, though, because it meant that he and I were still working with a stupid jackass. As he was whining and moaning, one phone call comes in. He says, well, I got Kevin right here available. And they're like, and they could hear on the phone, no, Kevin's a great guy. We love Kevin, but, there's just some things we got to have Seth for. And he says, all right, well, I'll put you on the list. And says, well, where is he now? And he said, well, he's out because somebody else called him out. And they laughed and said, yep, we understand, and hung the phone up. He went back to complaining. I don't even see how people can like that guy. And he says, well, he's not that bad a guy when you treat him decent, Jerry. He said, if this is how you treat him, he says, I'd bash you in the face, one guy told him. It didn't help the situation, but it gave him an idea. A second phone call came in and a third phone call, and it was going on through the day. He finally got mad, got in his car, and left. That's the type of management you have to be careful with what you're dealing with. You're dealing with your local management when people call in and ask for you because you've dealt well with the customer. That's every bit as important as getting along in the business itself. Last of all, I'm going to tell you something else that will help you when you show up at the shop. No, not last of all, second last. Because we're going to get into a little bit of customer on the other side. But your tools and tooling when you're walking in. May I say, if you're going in for lawn and garden, I don't care who you are, lawn and garden, automotive, any of them. And you say, no, wait a minute, no. Unless you're going in for appliance repair, you need to have a full set of screwdrivers, a full set of screwdriver sockets, a full set of Allen sockets eventually. The L wrenches alone are not going to work unless you're in the lowest of lawn and garden, chainsaws and such. And I don't mean lowest as in poor, bad. No, that's every bit as solid employment as any of it. Never put it down. Let me tell you, once you get used to working on trimmers and chainsaws and such, you get a bug for it. You really do. If it's something you like, I'd stay with it. It is a hoot, but it is somewhat specialized. But you're working in general, and I'm talking lawn and garden. From if you're down, walk behind mowers and down. No, it's not so critical. You just need stuff up to run an inch, maybe a little bit more. And half-inch drive is more than sufficient. Far more. 3/8 is going to handle probably 95% of everything you do. When you start getting into the riding lawnmowers and your garden tractors, you must have up to everything to 1.25 inches, all half-inch. And if you're smart and you know you're getting into the mini diesels, you need everything up to 1.5 inches. And you say, well, no, you're never, unless you get into the mid-size of the mini diesels, you're never going to get that high. But there's a lot of crossovers. You say, well, I'm going to get it in metric. Well, go ahead. A lot of them cross over both ways. Once you get used to the idea that 35 millimeter is 1 3/8, 32 millimeter is 1 1/4, and I forgot which one was a little bit bigger. 41 millimeter crosses over, and there's some others in there. 28 and 29, or 28's too small for 1 inch, depending on the nut, and 29 is a bit large, but it'll work. 28.5 millimeter is 1 inch. When you start remembering those things, it gets easy, much easier. Okay, so what was 37 millimeter? I think is, what was that one? 1 1/16. I run into that quite often. 27 millimeter, 30 millimeters, 1 3/16. And you'll see that some of them up through there, they don't cross over to anything. Dang, now you got to buy a socket. Never buy full sets when you're up in those bigger sizes. 1/2 inch, 3/4 any of them. Except, well, one full set, I should say. Metric or American, and then fill in the gaps. There'll be some like, what's that oddball? 36, that's the one that's oddball. 1 3/8 won't quite go on it. 1 7/16 is too loose. But if you have just 1 7/16, you can get away with it. And if it's on an impact, it doesn't work as well because it's too loose and chatters. But you need to have up to 1 1/4 on almost anything. Automotive, lawn and garden, small diesels, any of that. Up to 1 1/4 is minimum, and then you're going to add on from there. You're going to need a good voltmeter. Got to have it. Even with any more with the electronics, you need an excellent voltmeter that's going to cost you a couple of $100. Don't buy the cheap stuff. I'm going to go to Harbor Freight and whatever you want. But you need to be able to read milliamps. You need to be able to read up to at least, and the small stuff you need to read up to at least 30 amp draw. Why? Because you need to read mid-scale. You could have a little lawn tractor. Well, it only has like 12 volts. It goes 14 volt, 15 volts for charging. Yeah, and to read it accurately, even with digital, you need a 30 volt scale, 24 volt minimum. We used to have that for our analog systems. We're finding out in digital it's the same. The accuracy is in the middle 80% of the scale. It's the same. Strangely enough, it doesn't change. So those are your impacts. Well, you're going to buy, I want that big bad. Well, maybe, in your smaller stuff, you're going to have your little 3/8 low torque, 150 or below. Then your 3/8 high torque goes up to 350. And then you're going to get into your Mondo half inch. Yeah. Some of you don't like the high torque 3/8. Great. Buy a nice small half inch, 600 foot-pounds. Those are your basics going through that. When you're in heavy equipment and the big end of ag, you're going to need a 3/4 with a minimum of 1,200 foot-pounds. And the closer you get to 2,000, the better, because the cylinders are going to come out where you're going to need that undercarriage work. Wheel torques on some things, and the bigger stuff, you're going to need it. Once you start breaking that lawn and garden and you're in automotive, not so critical, you can go up to 1.5 inch and half-inch drive stuff and be great. Doing very well. You won't even need your 3/4, except to put an adapter in and turn those sockets. So that'll save you some money until you can afford up to the 3/4 sockets. You get into agriculture and you don't have anything 3/4 up to 1.5 inch, you're a fool. It's as simple as that. You're a fool. 1.5 inch is minimum in ag and construction. And you'll find that short quite often too. You want your 3/4 drive set up to 2 inch, and you want your wrenches up to 1.5 inch minimum, and then after that you can cheat a little bit with your crescent wrenches for a while. A nice 24. But you're running out of room. So those are some of the things you also need. And why am I saying that? You don't even have, no, you're going to the job interview. One of the things they're going to ask is, what do you have for tools? And when you show up with what you told them you had. Okay, it might take 2 trips, but make sure you can get it there. If you can, even take pictures of your assortment. They won't believe it because you can take pictures of anything, but at least they'll have an idea. And in some cases, you're going to tell them, no, I don't personally have it, but I have access to it and I can bring the tools here. I have permission. And then if you're in your 20s, that will fly. In most cases. You get a few of them that say, well, you got to have it when you start, son. That's, yeah, I'll bring it here when I start. Who are you stealing it from? Nobody. You want to call my dad or my uncle and I'll get you confirmation. Because there are some guys that are that picky. And if you haven't, and 2 things, if you have an answer for them, you filled in a blank. And some of them, you have an answer for them, it angers them because they're trying to find a way not to hire you. And if you take that away from them, they get a little snappy and short-tempered. But that's a good thing. You say, what do you mean? It means I don't get the job. Yeah, exactly. You don't want that job. And the other part of it is you may end up with that job. You're forthright and honest. And if he knows that, even if he doesn't like you, but he knows he can depend on you to get a straight story, and you do your best work because you give him a straight story, you've won the job. Anyway, I hope that helps some of you going out to get the job. Those are basics over the years. A, know how to write. B, know how to do basic math. Another one that will help you drastically is knowing your metric conversions, at least the basics. The millimeters, pressures, know how to convert megapascals back to PSI, which isn't too hard. Yeah, 1 megapascal is 145 PSI. That's one to know. Another one that is very, very, very critical that every one of you should know forever, all the way down the line. And you can tell the rest of the world, yes, we operate in the American English system. Too bad for you. But we can convert. We say, what do you mean? Well, 1 single millimeter equals 0.03937, and that's a short rounded version. Inch. 0.03937 inch. Oh, that's carrying it out there, and it's important. Now, if you're just doing straight measurements, like you're measuring brake rods and such, and you're going to do some adjustment after that, 40 thousandths, 0.040. That's what I use majority of the time. But when it starts getting into a little more critical dimensions, you're working with bearing clearances, valve adjustments and stuff, and some of you are going to say 40 is close enough for valve adjustment. No, for big engines it is. Small engines it is not. That's all I can tell you. We use that formula for Deutz for many, many years. The other one is, know that when they come to you, would you have anything to do with torque turn method? If you don't know what torque turn is, you're screwed to begin with. Torque turn is where you put a basic torque, say somewhere between 10 and 100 foot-pounds of your bolt. So Deutz, 4-cylinder bolts, turn them down, snug them by hand, and then they'll give you the pattern to follow, and they'll go to 35 foot-pounds. And there they all are. Make sure they're at 35. That's the beginning point. From that point on, Deutsch is going at 15 and 30 degrees as far as a full turn to a turn and a half. And you mark the bolt. And you know how far that each point is 60 degrees. What about the flats? Well, if you don't know the flats are 60 degrees apart as well, you lost the job and you shouldn't have it. Yeah, but what about 30? Well, 30 goes from a point to the flat. That's all. Point to a flat. Ding. Well, yeah, but yeah, mark the center of the flat. Don't be a fool. Now you've got 30 degrees. Well, what's 15 if it tells you 15? You got 2 marks. Go halfway in between. If you can describe to them how that you can handle such things, you'll be ahead of the game. Can you adjust overhead on a Cummins? If you're going into a Cummins shop, there's Cummins engines involved, and you got old L10s and M11s and ISMs, QSMs, ISX, QSX, multiple sizes of the new ISX and QSX. If you have a rough idea how to do basic adjustments on an engine and what you're looking for, and you can talk tech, you're ahead of the game. If they ask you how do you torque bolts, you tell them, turn it till it clicks. Well, yeah, but what if it stops before it clicks? And you loosen it up and turn it again. In other words, you stop, you hit something. Well, you try it, and if it clicks, you loosen it back up and start again. These are things that some of these guys actually do know what they're talking about, and they ask you, can you do that? Do you know how to the stupid question I always like is, do you know how to overhaul an engine? Well, okay, which one? What? Yeah, I've overhauled engines before. Which one is important to know? Because some of the procedures are different. You'll probably find out good answer. And how would you know that? Well, let me tell you, Briggs and Stratton and the Cummins aren't the same. And if you've done both, that's important to know. They'll ask you silly questions like that. Walk by, are you familiar with, closed center load sensing systems? And like, well, yeah, I am. I'm also with PFC systems as well. What? Pressure flow compensated. They're simpler. How is that? Well, the pump turns on and then the pump goes on standby until it's needed again. A simpler system than the load sensing. He says, how so? You tell him, well, load sensing goes by what the operator is requesting. It's not counting on a signal to operate. It's counting on a signal of proportion. If you can give them those simple answers, essentially you're telling them that you can explain things to him or her that they don't understand. You see, well, you start to sound like a genius. Maybe. But you start to sound like you're confident. You give them the answer they want. Don't expand into anything. You're old like me, you have to expand into something. It's like, well, that's just basic. You should know that. Yeah, I should know that. And then give them an idea why you know more. You say, well, that might intimidate them. And if it does, you need to know that. When you're young, it's handled different than when you're older. Considerably. Even walking in for the job, you walk in with a different attitude. And if you're looking at a young boss that you're going to be working for, once you pass 40, those young bosses do not like your confidence at all. However, do not back off on your confidence. Don't blow the information all over them like, I know more than you and all of that. You're going to give them that air anyway. And they're already going to be on their heels. They don't like feeling inferior. If you walk into the room and you're in your 40s and you're confident, well-dressed, and sit down, and I mean well-dressed like you're almost ready to work, but not quite. You come nice and clean for the interview to talk with them, appropriate dress for the occasion, they get intimidated anyway, 95% of the time. Just that simple. If you have a good young boss, you'll have two like I had with Jeff, what the heck was his name? Jeff, if you ever run into this, I'll remember your name in an hour. And then there was John Rosh. There were two good bosses we had, both of them. And we're talking night and day of people. Johnny was gregarious, loud, boisterous, but he could talk to people. He's one of those guys that he could run his mouth and almost make sense. And we could spar with them. Customers in this area, some of you aren't going to like it, but you need to know your people. Majority of the construction customers in this area are Italian. And if you can't handle yourself with them and do a little verbal sparring back and forth, you're screwed. They love a manager. They love a person that can go back and forth with them. They really do. Some of them that can handle a little racism now and then because they're checking to see if you're racist against them. One fella, Tucci, came in with a whole hog. Didn't work. Been fixed. Brought it over, laid it at an angle, hit it with a plastic hammer, and we heard a clink. Hooked it up and ran it for him. He says, oh. Guy looks at him, says, $150. Whoa! He goes off. I mean, we're talking Italian, ready to start a fight. He's right back. Stan Tucci. What do you mean $150? What for? He says, well, it's 25 for the work. The rest of it's for knowing where to hit it. You guys, go buy some donuts. He threw us some money, took his whole hog and left. We had a blast with these guys. Why? Because we didn't have to be like them, but as long as you just have fun with them. Not on them or about them. But if you can hold yourself up like a man, oh, you're gold with them. And then our managers would come in and chase them away because this is how we operate at Anderson Equipment. Yeah? Who do you think you are? We heard that more than once. And if you can handle yourself properly with a customer, that can infuriate an arrogant manager like that. But if your local manager is happy with what you're doing, you'll be in good shape. One of them said something one time, and he was cussing and groveling and going on about me in the service writer / secretary / clerical / whatever they wanted to call her at the time. They changed it. She was crazy. She sat there and said, "Why don't you fire the guy and get rid of him?" He says, "No, I can't." Why? He said, "Because when he goes out in the job, I don't have to worry about the job." What do you mean? He said, "He'll finish the job. I don't have to worry about what's been done. I don't have to like him." That's sometimes the highest praise that an older wrench can ever have. What was I doing at the time? We had two WA 600-1 and -1L loaders. One had a rear axle out of it, and the other one had the transmission out in the ground, hoses and everything busted from the guy who had been fired and removed from the company for insubordination, etc. Had really done some damage on this loader and didn't want to fix it. I've done some, not serious damage, but just stupid stuff. But it was stuff that wasn't that critical. The fact that he destroyed bad hoses that were hardened, did it purposely, and we knew that. But he said, it's really not out anything. The hoses were bad to begin with. It didn't matter what happened. They needed to be replaced right there and then. So it's, yeah, but I'm going to fire him and tell him he smashed the hoses. Okay, well, I can't help you there. But I had those two jobs at the same time, and that's when he made the comment. He says, I can go home tonight and go to sleep. Sometimes that is the highest form of praise that you can ever have. Whether they like you or not, if that's the praise they have of you. And you say, you're bragging about yourself, and I'm bragging about what I heard. And that's not bragging if you can deliver.